In order to make choices that are best for you, please note that this episode does include lengthy discussions of domestic violence.
Welcome to Lit Vibes Only, where we lit the shit out of books we love and hate. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Amanda.
Welcome to our podcast. Am I doing socials?
Yes. We literally just decided.
I thought I was just doing the welcome.
I said welcome and social, Kelsey.
Okay, please forgive us, everyone. We are recording after a work day, and it is hitting me so hard.
This is going to be such an interesting episode.
Oh, welcome. And you can find us on Instagram at litvibesonly_podcast and on TikTok and YouTube at Lit Vibes Only Podcast. We would love to hear from you. We are on Instagram like almost daily. Amanda and I both tag team that. I mostly do TikTok. But yeah, so do you want to tell them about our sticker?
Yeah, I would love to.
Never before seen, like first generation stickers.
They have been seen at this point. Multiple times, but very much trying to build the hype. I appreciate that. Yeah, we've got stickers and they're amazing and they're of our logo. And if you would like to get your hands on some, here's what you need to do. You need to hop on wherever you listen to your podcasts. You need to rate and review us. Please leave us a positive review. And then you're going to want to take a screenshot of that bad boy and send it to us on our socials. So either TikTok or on Instagram. Send us your screenshot, send us your address, and we will get you a sticker. We've already sent out a few and we're super stoked. Or you can email us at litvibesonlypodcast@gmail.com and we will also collect your information that way. So please review us. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. We love to hear your thoughts, what you do and do not want to hear from us.
Yeah.
Not that we'll take heed. We'll still do what we want, but
we want to improve. And, if the general consensus is please stop doing this particular thing, we might consider it. What was your work day like, Amanda?
It's just been very busy. I know I mentioned this in like our first episode when we were talking about like who we are and what we do. And this is my first year as a department chair. And I'm loving it. I think it's a good fit for me, but it's also just like a lot of lot of new stuff and new things to think about and new routines I need to build. And so instead of just kind of going through the motions, like I have done in previous years, like I know my curriculum, I know my class, I know what to do with kind of a lot of like muscle memory, so to speak. There's just a lot of building things and thinking about things in new ways. So it just takes a lot of energy and like mental energy that I wasn't expending in previous years. So I'm just like, and I had my first department chairs meeting this afternoon as well. So, which was exciting, but also like, stuff. Gotta do stuff.
So like so the department chairs got together?
Yes.
Okay.
So we had our department meeting yesterday after school, which I led my department meeting for the rhetoric department. And then
was that your first one?
Afternoon is no, I led one during our opening meetings in August. And I also led one at the end of last year as well. But so that was fine. But then, today all of the department chairs got together for the first time.
Got it.
Yeah. So I'm just like, I'm finding my groove. I'm finding my groove here. How about you?
Same. I just realized today, so I get very stressed in my job. Go figure. I would imagine like all my teachers and, the admin that I work with, our counselors, like we are definitely like stretched and it's a hard job sometimes. And right now I'm sitting on like over 100 emails that I haven't read. And I'm trying so hard to get through them. And some of the stuff is important, like I need to get to them. But I realized this afternoon that I stopped taking my GABA supplement. So I got married in July, right? And so I was taking GABA for stress. And I can literally feel the difference when I'm taking it and not taking it. So I can feel the stress in my body right now. And I was like, why do I feel like this?
Yeah.
And it's mostly like in my chest that I feel it. I don't know if everybody feels it that way, but that's where I feel it. And I was like, I was taking GABA, which really supports like stress relief. Oh, And
get on that. I've
and
never
then
heard
the
of
other
that.
thing too, I've noticed my brain is more chaotic right now, and I think GABA really helps calm your system in general. And so
Yeah.
my ADHD is like off the freaking
Oh,
charts right
no.
now. Yeah, and I was like, "Why am I struggling so much?" It is likely because of that supplement.
You
And
need to send me the information for this
yeah,
because I
it
need
is
it.
actually very supportive. I can't live without it. And clearly, I just forgot about it, which
Yeah.
okay, ADHD brain
Yeah.
makes sense. But yeah, I was just like, now I'm feeling like so out of whack. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was just sick too. And so I'm like recovering from
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
And I was out Monday, which also like reason why I missed so many emails earlier in the
Mhm.
week. And so it just
Mhm.
puts this whole like damper on my week, trying to catch up on everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just feel super chaotic at the
We're like
moment.
heading into this episode. We're just scattered and chaotic. Our ADHD is off the charts, so y'all buckle
So
up.
we'll
Who knows
see what
what's gonna
happens.
happen? Who knows what's gonna happen in this episode? It is gonna be our first Lit Scripts
I'm
episode, which
so excited.
we're super stoked about, especially because in this particular episode, we're gonna be discussing a movie and a book that came out quite recently, within the last couple of months, and that I think a
Yeah.
lot of our listeners are gonna be familiar with. And
Curious about?
It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover.
Yes.
So, yeah, what we're gonna do in terms of the structure of this, you can correct me, Kelsey, if I'm wrong. We're
Yeah.
gonna kind of summarize the plot of the book since that came first, especially for folks who may not be familiar with it, and perhaps give a little bit of our thoughts on the book itself. We'll then talk about the movie and only mention the plot points that are different from the book.
Mhm.
And then we're just gonna kind of talk about them together, like what we liked, what we didn't like, and because there's a lot of controversy
Around
around
this
around this movie.
movie
Also,
with
we're
the
gonna dive
cast.
into that a little bit. And again, another opportunity, right? If you have watched the movie, read the book, done both, and have thoughts, please share them. Please comment on this episode, especially if you listen on Spotify or like get on our socials and let us know
Yeah.
for sure.
We would love that.
Um,
Do you
absolutely.
wanna, like, split the summary? Y'all, we got some feedback about our summaries.
We did.
And so we are doing our best now to have some sort of outline for our summaries.
Mhm.
So let us know what you think about that difference.
We're
Or
gonna
do you
try to be
like the
more
chaos?
concise. It
Do you
can
like
still
the
be chaos,
chaos?
even
Or
with
do
the
you like
outline. So, like, let's not make any promises.
do you wanna do so I'm in the,
I
document now.
see.
Do you
Yeah.
wanna do the highlighted and I'll do the bottom portion?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. So the main protagonist of the book is Lily Bloom,
Mhm.
and
Lily
she
Blossom Bloom.
Lily Blossom Bloom. And the book opens with Lily on a rooftop in Boston in a kind of an introspective moment. Her father, her abusive father, has just passed away and she's been at the funeral, and her musings are interrupted by a man coming onto the roof and like kicking a chair, having a moment, and that is Ryle. And essentially, they start chit-chatting, some flirtation happens, and Ryle very much wants to get with Lily, but makes it very
Mhm.
clear, like, he's, like, in it for one night stands, doesn't want a relationship, doesn't want a family, doesn't want marriage, and Lily's like, "No, thank you." And so that's how the book opens. You know, time passes, I think it's, like, 6 months. Lily gets an
Mhm.
inheritance from her father passing, and she decides to use that money to open up a flower shop
Oh, sh
that she's wanted to for forever, and it's a little ironic because of her name. She ends up hiring Alyssa, who we find out later is Ryle's sister, to be
Mhm.
essentially like her assistant in the shop. And so she starts to form this friendship and this bond with Alyssa, not knowing she's Ryle's sister. And
Mhm.
because of their relationship and because Ryle is obviously in Alyssa's life, their paths cross. I think in the book, Lily, hurts her ankle at the shop, and then Ryle is one of the folks that shows up to assist her. And so, like, their paths start to cross. And eventually, after much persistence from Ryle and him finally saying that he does have feelings for Lily and doesn't just want to sleep with her, they decide to start dating. So they start a relationship. And it's right about this time in the book that we start to flash back to Lily's
Mhm.
past. So there's two timelines happening in the book, the present and then Lily as an adolescent. And
Mhm.
it tells the story of Lily and her high school friend Atlas. Atlas is an unhoused young man who comes from his own turbulent family relationship. He's currently living in the abandoned house behind Lily's house. Lily is well off. Lily's father is well respected in the community, but
The mayor.
Lily's father, yes, But Lily's father is abusive and abuses primarily the mother. There's not a lot of abuse happening between Lily and her father, which complicates things. And we find out that Lily and Atlas form this relationship, which then turns romantic. Atlas ends up leaving to go to Boston, but comes back, I believe, on Lily's 16th birthday. They end up having sex for the first time. Lily's father finds them together, freaks out, beats Atlas with a baseball bat, so much so that he has to be taken away to the hospital. And that is the last time that Lily sees him as an
Mhm.
adolescent. He promised that they were like going to find each other and go to Boston and all of these things. Doesn't
Mhm.
happen. And so then we flash back to the present. And, Ryle and Lily are still dating. And we encounter like the first domestic violence situation with them, which is that Ryle's pulling a casserole out of the oven one day, burns his hand. Lily kind of finds the whole thing a little bit funny. She
Mhm.
laughs, and then he pushes Lily and hurts her. And I'll stop there and let you pick up the rest of it.
Lily's mom comes to town. They go to this restaurant together, and it actually happens to be Atlas's restaurant. And so Lily sees him for the first time since childhood, and definitely has like a moment where she's like, "Oh my God, that's Atlas." And
And also,
then,
I'm gonna jump in because I made a mistake.
oh,
The DV situation, the casserole dish happens after the dinner that you're talking about right now. I like
oh yeah,
jumped that line. So yeah, go ahead.
um, no worries. And then Ryle confronts Lily and is like, "Oh gosh, where have you been?" And da da da.
So that
There,
happens. Then there's the DV situation that I talked about with the casserole
yeah,
dish. And then they end up going back to Alice's
the
restaurant
second
because
time.
Alyssa and her husband are celebrating her pregnancy. Yeah, go
And
ahead.
so then they're again back at the restaurant. Lily has opened her flower shop and things are going great. And Lily, from the DV situation incident, she has like a bruise on her eye. And Atlas, from his experience with Lily's father, like knows exactly what's going on and is concerned for Lily. And so they kind of exchange a moment where she realizes she knows that Atlas knows that Ryle is the one that gave her that bruise. And so she ends up going to the bathroom, and Atlas follows her into the bathroom and confronts her and is like, "Leave him. You need to leave him. I know he's abusing you, and he's trying to be like, just a thoughtful person trying to like help her out." And they're in the bathroom together alone, and they come out, and Ryle is right there. And Ryle gets really worked up and tries to fight Atlas, and they kind of get in a scuffle. And then and Ryle leave, and they know to never go back to that restaurant. And Ryle asks some questions about like her relationship with Atlas because when they first met, she mentioned Atlas. And so he's like, "Okay, are you still interested in? Is there something going on here?" The next day, Atlas comes to the flower shop to talk to Lily, and he gives her his number, like opens up the case and is like, "If you ever need me, here's my phone number," slips it in and then leaves. And she's just persistent, like, I'll never need it. I'm not in that situation. She's really not confronting like what's actually happening. Now there's a second DV situation, and
And at this point, Lily and Ryle are now married. They went to Vegas and
oh,
got
okay.
married.
So yes. So now Ryle and Lily are married. And there is a second DV situation incident where Ryle finds Atlas's phone number and he is going down the stairs and she's following him. And then he pushes her down the stairs and she blacks out and doesn't remember exactly what happened. And he, again, in this situation, is trying to play it off as an accident. Like he didn't really do that. She fell. And that's what he ends up telling her. And she's like, "No, like you pushed me." And so that's like a very, telling situation. And she's starting to kind of figure those things out. Then Alyssa, the
Hmm.
sister, finds out that this had happened. And Alyssa helps Ryle come clean about like his own traumatic past, which was they had a brother and their brother died because Ryle shot him.
Hmm. Hmm. They were like playing around
Um,
with their dad's gun.
yeah, and shot his
Hmm.
brother and he died. And so Lily kind of ends up being really empathetic around that situation. It's like, okay, he can change. Like, I know he's trying to do good. She kind of talks herself into like staying with him.
Hmm.
This is when things kind of get really bad. So the other thing about the book is that the way that you're going back in time is through Lily's journals. And so she's reading her old journal entries that kind of outline what happened with Atlas and how she fell in love with him and like how her dad beat him. And so Ryle ends up finding her journals. He also found the magnet that is like from Boston.
Better in Boston.
Better in Boston. And so he makes the connections of these things and knows that this magnet is from Atlas and that all of her journals like say that, you know, she really loved him. And in this DV incident, he actually like headbutts her and even tries to rape her. So Lily at this point calls Atlas. And then she's in the hospital with Atlas and she discovers that she's pregnant. She doesn't tell Ryle she's pregnant and has a heart-to-heart with his sister. And Alyssa tells her that I'll never forgive you if you go back to him. Because Alyssa understands like she loves her brother, but doesn't want Lily in that kind of situation. And then Lily is still like, you know, debating whether or not she's going to end up with Ryle. And Ryle does find out about the baby. She slowly lets him back into her life. And then she has the baby. As soon as she has her baby, she tells Ryle, like literally in the delivery room, that she wants a divorce. And he obviously doesn't want to agree, but really, and it comes full circle. And she says, what would you tell your daughter if her husband hit her? If her husband tried to rape her? And there's a line in the book where she's like, it ends with us. And she's including Ryle in that and her baby. And then in the very, very end, she runs into Atlas after the baby is like, I don't know, less than a year, but, you know, older. And they end up getting together.
That was really long. I might have to
That was really long. I wonder how people are going to feel about that one. But we got a lot of the details in. And
I think the good thing is that the movie does do a good job of sticking really closely to the book. Yeah. And so we did very much summarize both of them for you. So I guess in talking about the book, I read this book well before there was any talk of like a movie and all of that. And I remember for a long time deliberately choosing not to read this book because everything I had heard about it, or what I heard most often, was that this book romanticized domestic violence. And obviously, I found that really problematic, as just a lot of people. So I was like, I'm not going to read this book. I'm not going to support this author and read this book. But then I encountered one of my friends who read it and who liked it and kind of had a different take on it versus what other people were saying, which is why I finally read it. And we can talk about this. Like, in my personal opinion, I actually thought it was such a nuanced and thoughtful, and even though I've never been in a DV situation, realistic portrayal of domestic violence that dove into the kind of the gray areas of domestic violence instead of just painting it out like the abuser's the bad guy, full stop, and doesn't actually dive into the ways in which the abuser can be, you know, charming and charismatic and also potentially the victim of their own traumatic past. Sure. And I thought that the book did a great job of helping us see why Lily fell in love with him, why she stayed with him, because it's never that simple. It's never that simple that folks on the outside, you know.
Yeah, I think I agree with you mostly, just that I grew up in a household where my dad was abusive. And so it very much is like, you always want to ask, like, why did the woman stay with the abusive man? Right. And obviously it's like, that's not the right question. And I think that this book, the way that it's written, really dives into those aspects. I think it does a good job of like understanding where Lily is coming from. And like a DV situation doesn't just start out as a DV situation. It starts out as a gradual like leap into that, right? It just happens overnight. And so the fact that there were 3 different situations in this book where she was abused really helps paint the picture. And she was going to go back to him. And there were times when in the book that he ended up getting angry and then corrected himself right? And he was like, I need a break and like I need to leave. There was a situation where that happened. And so that gives Lily hope that it's not going to happen again. I do struggle a little bit with Ryle. Not every abuser would be like willing to like work in that way, right? Willing to work on themselves. And so I think that this is a possibility, but sometimes that's not the situation, right? Like my mom and my dad, like looking back at that, I don't think my dad was ever being like reflective of his experience. And so, yeah, I don't think that this is impossible, this situation. It definitely doesn't represent all situations. And so I just want to be clear about that too. I think that's what the issue is that people have in it, right? It's like it's actually showing who he is too.
Well, and we're going to talk about this in an upcoming episode because I believe we touch on it in one of the episodes that will be coming up in October for our Lit Recs, when we talked about like when you are reading a story, you are reading one story and therefore you know information about one situation or one person. And so I do think if you're going to try and take the situation with Ryle and Lily and then try and apply it broadly to domestic violence, like of course there are going to be discrepancies. Of course, there are going to be differences. Or of course, there are going to be things that don't line up. But this is one way in which domestic violence can show up in a relationship in this particular dynamic. And so I think having, you know, on social media, seen people, and including the video you sent me on TikTok, where folks who have been in similar situations that very much mirrored Lily and Ryle's relationship were like, yes, I feel seen. Like I've been that person. I've been in that situation. And this rang really true for me. So yeah, I get that it isn't reflective of all DV situations, but certainly this is one way in which domestic violence can show up. And I appreciated, again, that it also dove into like why Ryle is the way he is, and not as an excuse for his behavior, but to explain that often people who are perpetuating violence or hurting others are hurting themselves. And, you know, that's not news. It's, you know, like we know that saying hurt people. But I like that it did make that part of the storyline because, again, it can be one of the things that factor in, as it did in this story, when a woman is making a decision about whether or not she stays. Because she's like, well, I feel empathy for him. Like he did experience something really traumatic.
He's
and
trying.
That really did. And he's trying. And he did, you know, this did impact him. It was outside of his control and all of these things. So I did not think it romanticized it. And I think where folks are getting that from is that, at least from the book before like the movie came out, was that like, oh, well, like Ryle's handsome and he's charming and he's charismatic and he's wealthy. And so because the abuser like looks all shiny and sparkly, somehow they equated that with romanticizing domestic violence. I think that is ridiculous. There are plenty of like good looking, wealthy, intelligent, charming people, but also perpetrators of domestic violence. So I think that's a really lazy connection to make. And that really bothered me. I think the other side of romanticizing it is that, the book, when you look at the cover, if you've seen the cover of the book, it is like florals and it has like, you know, like it does look like it's just going to be a fun little romance. So I will give folks that if they're talking about it, romanticizing it in that way, for sure. But if you're talking about just the text itself, I actually don't see that.
Yeah. The other point I wanted to make too is like on the tail end of things at the very end, Ryle does just pretty much accept like the divorce, and Lily was able to say that to him and like have it land in a good way. And I think that was another point of where people were like, that's unrealistic, da da da. Yeah, I could see that point of view. I agree that I don't think that it is romanticizing. That's not the feeling that I got from the book, but I could see that being kind of a pain point because I was in a not a DV situation, but like I had a partner that was emotionally and abusive. And when I left that person, that was not my experience. They tend to get like very angry. And so I think that people who were, you know, going through a DV situation, which I think were the majority of the people that were like complaining about this point, right? I think that it makes sense. Like, it's just that I understand like having big feelings about like a portrayal of DV, right? And so like I said, and you said, this is one portrayal of that. And it doesn't mean that it's portraying all stories. And if it doesn't portray your particular story, like that's okay. And these stories can exist like in the same space, you know?
Yeah. I will also say too, and because I read the sequel, which is It Starts With Us, and it does dive in a little bit more to Ryle's post-divorce behaviors, because
Interesting.
it isn't this clean, easy break.
Oh,
So It Ends With Us is not the end. And
got
so
it.
for those folks who might have been like, oh, that was too easy, it does dive into kind of the complexity in the second book. There's other things we could say about the book, pros and cons, et cetera. We won't get into that.
Yeah.
But it does show the reader that it wasn't just a cut and dry, simple break. Everyone's happy. That's not what happened. It's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what I think is true
yeah,
about
of course.
life.
Yeah.
These situations.
Yeah.
You know, I would say the other thing that kind of lends itself to this idea is that Colleen Hoover has been, oh God, having trouble with words today. Has been accused basically of herself like romanticizing domestic violence. And so part of the issue with her is my understanding is that the way that she promotes these books are all about, this is a romance book. This is a cute romance book. And like if I had no idea what I was getting into, this would have been a really hard read for me. I mean, it already was a hard read because every time I read about something like DV, I get triggered. And so it was already a hard read. And if I went in blind thinking, oh, this is just about cute florals,
as a lot of people did. Yeah, a lot of people did.
That I definitely find problems with that. And that kind of lends itself into how Colleen Hoover and Blake Lively wanted to and did promote this movie.
Which is so interesting, because I've been thinking about this, because I know a lot of what we're saying, like, it's not new. There's not, like, a lot of this stuff has been talked about at length on social media and different platforms. But one of the things that I'm curious about, because I did not read this book like when it first came out and was first on people's radars.
Yeah.
And I'm making an assumption, but based on interviews with Colleen Hoover, she wanted to write this book because of the abusive situation that she witnessed with her mother when she was younger. Her mother ended up leaving and got remarried, etc. And like, that's where this book came from. So it came from a place of like authenticity and from lived experience. And so I think she started off in a great place. I think the book took off, became super popular. And I think things have changed for her since then. I think they're definitely, and again, I'm making assumptions because I don't know, but I think the popularity and the fame and the money has definitely shifted perhaps away from her original intention, because she's a social worker. I found this out. She is a social worker.
Like currently?
She was.
Or use.
Okay, she was a social worker. She started dabbling in writing like for fun. She self-published her first book, which I think was called Slammed, on like Amazon.
Okay.
And that like randomly took off and became super, super popular. And then she decided to kind of switch over and become a full-time author.
Dang.
And so I think what we're seeing perhaps is the influence and impact of sudden, quote unquote, fame, popularity, and the ways it can shift perhaps our moral compass a bit. And has her making choices that I don't know pre-fame Colleen would have made. So I think a lot of this came on pretty suddenly for her. And she's talked about that as well. Like, I didn't expect any of this to happen. And so I do wonder, because I agree with you. I think the way that she's marketed the book at this point, the way that she's come up with like her nail polish lines and like how it's all about the flowers and their girliness. And it's like, no, this is about domestic violence.
Yeah.
I do just wonder about, how money and fame has played an influence on who she is now and how she's marketing the books that she wrote.
Okay. I just looked it up, and Colleen Hoover, because I was like, she has like over 20 books.
Yeah, she's I think over 20, right?
26.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's written
So
a ton of
she's
books.
just like busting them out continually. And like, I'm looking at the release dates, and I'm like, every single year, sometimes 2 a year.
Yeah. So she's very much capitalizing on her, again, which makes it's very strategic, right? But I think if you're going to choose to write a book and then help produce a movie about something like this, like that needs to take a back seat. your concerns about income and fame and popularity, like that takes a backseat to this story that you're trying to tell and what that means for so many people and the ways that you can use your
Yeah.
platform to help people. I don't think she
For
utilized it
real.
well
Oh, no. Yeah.
at
Yeah.
all.
And I think that's where like the drama within the cast really sprouted from.
Yeah.
I think people don't talk as much about Colleen Hoover, as much as I've seen about Blake Lively.
No. Yeah. She's kind of taken
Yeah.
like this back seat, but she's also very much on, we're talking about sides. Like she's very
Yeah.
much with Ryan and Blake
Yeah.
in this whole venture. And we
Mhm,
have like
mhm.
Justin Baldoni on the other side that's like,
Yeah.
hey, remember domestic violence? Remembering the women that we're trying to
We're trying to yeah.
support and raise
Mhm.
awareness for and like all of these things. And they're just like, we're cute florals and come to the movies with your girlies.
Yes.
It's unfortunate because, and I don't know how you feel about it. I actually liked the movie. Aside from like, and we can talk about that later about some like maybe the casting of Lily and the sister
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
the outfits. But in terms of the story that was told, because it did so closely align with the book,
Yeah.
and because it also did a really good job in the way that it showed that those moments of domestic violence, you were like, wait, was that domestic violence? Did
Right.
I see that right? Like
Exactly.
they made it really ambiguous because in those moments when it's happening, the woman or the victim, it could be a man as well. It's like,
Mhm.
wait, what just happened? And can I trust my own experience? And
Right.
I thought the movie did a beautiful job of that as well. So overall, I actually liked the movie. I have
Mhm.
no major critiques of like the content of the movie.
Yeah.
Marketing.
I actually really liked the book and movie. Like, I
Mhm,
thought they were
mhm.
both pretty
Yeah,
solid,
I liked them
and it was
equally.
funny, I actually went with my mom and my sister, and my sister and I were, like, crying in the movie. Yeah, it was definitely, like, obviously, emotionally triggering, and
Yeah.
just I loved the scene with Lily and Alyssa at near the
Mhm,
end
yeah,
where she's like, "You don't fucking get back with him."
yeah, yeah,
It was a
totally.
good moment, but
Yeah.
yeah, no plot like issues
No.
really. Yeah, just there was like less of the DV situation actually because there were 3 in the book and
Mhm.
2 in the movie, I think.
No, they're all 3 in the movie.
No, I don't think so.
The casserole, the pushing down the stairs, and the attempted rape, they're all in there.
Oh, shoot, you're right.
Yeah,
Okay.
they are.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, which I think yeah, again, great choice. I think they all need to be in there, and I think it as you said when we
Mhm.
were talking about the
Oh.
book, it shows the
Mhm.
escalation of violence and the severity and intensity, right? It keeps getting
Right.
worse because
Yeah,
the
yeah.
3rd time is the worst time that she's injured.
I think what I remembered now is that it didn't show like the talk with Ryle after the second one
Correct.
and then like their correction, right?
Mhm.
And movies don't have time. They have to cut things. And so that was the part that I was like, dang, that
Mhm.
was cut. And the fact that he had a moment in the book where he corrected himself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I think like you mentioned, like the messaging of the movie and the messaging of the book, I think are consistent.
mhm,
And even though a couple things were cut from the movie or the timing might have changed a little bit, it
mhm.
still very much told the same story in much the same way. And I came
Yeah.
away with very much the same impression in that again, this is a nuanced situation. There's black and white and there's also gray. And you can get a better
Mhm.
sense again of why a person might find themselves in this situation to begin with and why they might stay. And I think that understanding is so crucial for folks who are not in DV situations and have never been in one because
Yeah.
it is so easy. And I've been guilty of it too, and just be like, well, like, and unfortunately, right, we're wired to be like, why doesn't the woman leave instead of asking like, why the fuck is the guy doing this to begin with?
Mhm.
Right, that's the
Right.
question we should be asking. But because of
Right.
the way we're socialized, like, oh, we're putting it on the woman, right? And
Exactly.
so I do like that about this book and this movie because I think if you are someone who's going into it with any sort of self-awareness and desire to learn, what you'll come
Mhm.
away with is like, I need to like slow my roll and I not need to stop judging folks who find themselves in those situations. And I can also now better see how that happens and how it could actually happen to me. Like it could happen to
Mhm.
anybody because it's always like, oh, it's just like a certain type of person who would ever
Right.
find themselves in that situation. Like, no, literally anyone could find
Yeah.
themselves in that situation, and I think the movie,
Totally.
make that really clear, which I really liked.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
while Lily was like this really strong woman,
Mhm.
uh, she found herself in a situation like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
When she very much was like, I would never do that because
Mhm.
my mom was in
Mhm.
that situation. I
Mhm.
can't. She
Mhm.
saw all the things that her mom went through, and
Yeah.
and her mom in the book never left her dad, and
Right.
she was with him until the day that he died.
Yeah.
And so I think in the book it leaves a lot of questions for Lily. And it's like, gosh, mom, why did you? I know there was like a moment in the book where it's
Mhm.
like, why didn't you leave him? Again, though, putting the
Yeah.
burden
On
on
the
women.
victim. Yeah,
Yeah, the
exactly.
victim,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the things that you didn't like, because we kind of talked about things that we did like. One of the
Mhm.
things you didn't like, and I'm looking at the notes, is that you did not there were 2 things that you wrote down. One is that wrong casting for Alyssa and Lily,
Oh,
and
yes.
the clothing choices, like the wardrobe choices.
So okay. I actually thought Lily was wrong casting. I
I
was
thought she
like,
was too old,
I thought she
honestly.
was, yes, and just I didn't like how she played Lily as much. She kind of came off as like, what do I want to say? The only words that's coming to mind is like doofus. She was just
Like an
laughing at
airhead?
everything, like an airhead, yes. And
Oh,
I remember
interesting.
Lily didn't come off to me that way
No.
in the book, but she definitely came off to me that way in the movie, just like kind of laughing at everything, like Ryo would say, and it was just like and kind of
Oh,
airheady-ish.
interesting. I get that impression, but okay.
But also her clothes may have played a factor in that.
They were so zany and
I
off the wall and not at all in line with how I imagined Lily in my head.
No, not at all. And so I just, it was just that those pieces did not
Yeah.
fit for me. And so, I thought that Lily could have been played better, in my opinion. And then, go ahead. I see
No, I
you
was gonna say
wanting to
this
say
was well,
something.
I just wanted to jump in before you got to Alyssa because I don't wanna,
Okay,
like, have to
okay.
backtrack. So, I also had big issues, not so much with I thought Blake Lively was too old to be playing the character, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So I did have the issue. I didn't necessarily pick up on the airheadedness quality, but that's a fair point. The thing I will say, though, that really distracted me and that I really didn't like was the wardrobe choices. And so I did a little
Yeah.
bit of, like, Googling before this episode, and it turns out that the costume designer that worked on this movie was also her costume designer for Gossip Girl. And in Gossip Girl, like,
Oh,
her character, is like this super wealthy
yeah.
socialite, and so she could get away with wearing things that were, like, edgy or, like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like,
Mm-hmm.
It does not work for Lily's character
No.
at all.
Lily's
And
like, yeah.
literally every time she came on scene in, like, a new, because I love costuming, I did it in college, and so I'm
Oh.
very hyper aware of costuming in movies, and so every time she would come into, like, a new scene wearing something, that was, like, the first thing I looked at, and I was like,
Oh god.
"WTF? Like, who does
They even
this?"
they even doubled up on some of her stuff, like, she was wearing the same thing
They
a
yeah,
couple
yeah,
times, and I was
they
like, "Oh,
yeah.
that's an interesting choice." Like, I don't know that you don't see that very
You
often
don't see
in a
it you don't
movie.
see it often. I didn't mind that so much,
Yeah,
it's just I don't wanna see these pieces again because I
but
don't
it
think
was
they
distracting
fit. It was distracting, and
because I noticed
apparently
it.
she pulled stuff, so I found this out from research. She pulled some of the things she wears in the movie are her own items, Ryan's clothing, and
Oh
also
my
she's friends with
lord.
Gigi Hadid, and so it's also some of her pieces as
Oh
well.
my
So she's
goodness.
just like, and again, it goes back into her wanting to promote this movie in a certain way and make it this, like,
Yeah.
cute little rom-com where she gets to look good, and it's like, that's not what the point of the movie is. But anyhow, go back to we're talking
Uh,
about the sister.
well, I mean, on TikTok, everyone's still talking about this. I see those videos coming up still, like, time and time again, where it's just something about the movie, right? And
Mhm.
then one of the things that's coming up recently is that, like, Target, I think, has started carrying, those pants where it's layered of, like, shorts and then
Oh, yes,
pants,
like the boxer above
and
the
it's actually,
waistband.
like,
Yep.
sewn in.
Yep, it
And
is. I've
people
seen
are
it. I
like,
saw it.
effects of "It Ends With Us." Like, please no. Please
It's
no.
already
I
just a
really don't
horrendous
think those are
look.
gonna sell well.
Honestly, you'd be surprised what my students come to school in, so
Oh god.
I
Well,
wouldn't.
yeah. I've never seen a student in something like that.
Oh,
So
I have, even before the movie came out, but it wasn't my female well, no, it was. I have had female students already
Oh my
doing, like, the
gosh.
boxer briefs above, like, the wide leg low
Oh
yeah,
goodness.
that started last year, actually.
Ugh.
So, yeah.
Wow.
What were you gonna
Wow.
say about Alyssa, though? Because you said
Um,
you didn't like her casting.
I didn't like her casting because that I can't take that actress out of Parks and Rec.
I know. And she's such a zany character.
And like her nasally high-pitched voice too, it didn't match Alyssa to me, because Alyssa was like this warm woman who was like trying to get pregnant and like was just kind of motherly almost to Lily, and was a little older than Lily. I don't think they ever said their ages, but that's the feeling that I got from Alyssa. And Alyssa felt younger than Lily in the movie. And so
interesting. I thought they felt like they were the same age.
Yeah. I don't know.
I did have your reaction when she first came on scene and I figured out who she was. And I was like, oh, would not have cast her.
No.
And then I remember almost immediately after thinking, oh, but I think I could also in real life see the physical similarities between her and Justin Baldoni, and people being like, that's why we're going to cast her.
Oh,
like,
maybe,
they look like they could be related, because they do. But I love Parks and Rec. I've seen every episode. I've watched the season multiple times.
I love
Parks and Rec. It is very hard to erase that image of her as I'm watching this very serious movie.
Gosh, yeah, exactly. And I don't know that I can see Justin Baldoni and her like looking related, because in Parks and Rec they have the siblings. They look related.
They do.
And they're fucking airheads and like they just like the whole thing. It's too funny. Yeah, those were my biggest like beefs with the movie. Blake Lively could have just been pulled out, plucked out, and then it would have been better. I almost like looked up other actresses that I got.
Same thing, like who would I cast instead of Blake Lively? I didn't decide on anyone, or hadn't decided on anyone. I need to give it more thought. But yeah, to your point, I probably would have recast both of those roles. So and this is just like a general note, and then we can like move on to like final recs and wrap things up. But so if I watch a movie and then find out after the fact that that it's based on a book, I will not go back and read the book. I don't think I've ever done it.
No.
And I have a very vivid imagination. And so I can't then read a book having someone else's images in my mind. Like it does not work for me.
Oh,
and so
I see.
I always have to read the book first and then watch the movie. And I will say it was a little bit freaky in the movie, because the scene on the rooftop, the way that the roof looked and everything was like exactly how I'd envisioned it in my mind when I was reading. And I was like, oh, this is so weird. Like, yes, you nailed it, because this is also how I thought this like scene would look, not necessarily play out, but how it would look.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. But this is like a little bit of a tangent, but I am that kind of reader. I will always read before I watch, and I will never go back and read something after I've watched if I'd never read it before. Like never ever.
Yeah,
that's like a hard and fast rule.
It's not a rule for me, but I definitely oh my God. Prefer. I was literally saying the word and it escaped my mind.
As you were saying.
I prefer reading it.
This episode.
I prefer reading it before watching the movie. And so that's what I did with It Ends With Us, but I just recently read it because I'm not super into Colleen Hoover, and I was really nervous about getting into her books. And, I was very surprised that I liked it. So, but I think we're going to be reading.
You're going to be reading another Colleen Hoover book I think in our November episode. So
yeah,
that's a wild ride. I'll save that for later.
It's very polarizing, that book.
Oh, it is.
I've heard like really great things and really bad things.
And
so
we're going to have a great discussion. So stay tuned for more. Final recommendations. Kelsey, book and or movie. Would you recommend that folks watch this movie and or read this book, or both?
Dang, I actually didn't really think about it.
Want to go first?
I mean, well, I'm thinking like I don't necessarily recommend them. Okay. They're okay.
So you don't recommend them. Okay.
Like I liked them, but I don't necessarily recommend them. Huh. Interesting. Yeah. That's how I feel.
Do you want to tell us why?
Well, mostly like it is a very triggering topic, and I just want people to be careful with like, how they approach that. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for everyone. It wasn't like a amazing book either. Like it was a solid book that, had sounding so strange. I'm like, clear plot line. It had a clear like theme and follow through, right? Like, and it's not like amazing writing or anything. It's just, yeah, okay. And the movie, like, I liked it, but I don't necessarily think I would like recommend it to people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You go. Because do you have solid?
I'm in the same place, except okay. I think I would recommend it with warnings, right? Obviously with trigger content warning, because I have not read a lot of books about domestic violence. I've read some, and I've encountered it in books where there are moments of it, right? Like the whole book's not about it, but there are moments of it. This is, I think, the first book or one of the first books I read where it is about DV. Like that is the main crux of the plot, and it's why this book exists. And because, like I said, I think it handles the subject matter in a really thoughtful way, I would recommend it to people, I think. Again, this book is not like, I don't even know if I gave it 5 stars or anything like that, but I do think the portrayal of domestic violence is one that can be really helpful for folks who have never been in that situation to increase their awareness and empathy and help them recognize, again, the ways in which domestic violence can show up in a way that's not so like obvious and in your face, because it can show up that way.
Yeah.
But I think I would, just as a way to raise awareness and educate people. In terms of the movie, I think I would recommend it to people who'd read the book. Because I feel like if you read the book and you'd quote unquote enjoyed it, I feel like enjoyed it's the wrong word, but got something out of it, I think you would also get something out of the movie as well, because they're very similar. I think the only caveat to both of those things is, do we want to support Colleen Hoover right now?
Yeah.
No. Maybe just borrow it from the library. Don't buy it. Or Blake Lively. So that's like a little bit of like my own, like, I don't know if I feel comfortable right now. I mean, I already spent the money on,
we did.
We did
this episode.
Yeah. But that would be, I think, my one little like disclaimer. Yeah. And I think it's one of those situations too, like, do we separate the art from the artist kind of situation, right? Even though she's making kind of questionable choices right now, does that in any way discount this work that she's created that can actually, I think, be quite beneficial in a lot of ways? So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And folks, this may be one of the only times that Amanda and I will agree.
Yeah, we have moments of agreement in the various listener quoted episodes, but you're right.
Yes.
That's a rare moment, so enjoy it. All right, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, folks.
Yeah.
I've also realized that I always say that at the end, like, awesome. And then I'm like, let's wrap things up.
Fantastic.
Great. So yeah, comment on our episodes, leave us
Let us know
feedback
what
on
you
your socials.
think.
Let us know what you thought. This is a conversation that's still happening, especially on socials. So what did you think?
Yeah.
And we can have a chat. We can interact. All right. Well, thanks, guys. And we'll see you on Mondays.
Yeah.